Welcome to the Clear Cut Chronicles podcast with your hosts, Matt Anderson and Tyler Nicola.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode, guys. It's been a minute. Yeah, it's been a little while since Tyler and I have been able to get together and record another podcast. Today, we just want to talk about our 2025 seasons. I guess all of 2025, as far as just kind of the progression of the spring through the end of the year and how that looks for both of us in the outdoors. Just kind of want to run through that for you guys, break down how the season went for us as far as bow hunting goes and rifle hunting went, and just kind of break down on things that we had success with, failures, and eventually this will bleed kind of into a part two that we'll be doing recently, which is our plans for the 2026 season. So without further ado, Tyler, how you been?
Oh man, I'm doing all right. Got a little bit of a cold going on, so apologize to anyone if I got the sniffles. Probably not the best content creator right now, but we'll give it a whirl here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you haven't been out doing any scouting or anything like that yet, have you?
I think you could summarize my preseason scouting to this point, which what is it right now? It's March 4th.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's still relatively early.
yeah, I'm still coming off that foot surgery, so physical therapy has been my preparation for my 2026 Wisconsin hunting season. And Iowa hunting season, hopefully too, if I draw that. But my foot is getting close to 100%, so I'm feeling excited about that. But I know April 18th, me and my buddy Jake planning to planning to draw Iowa, so we're gonna make a trip to
You'll have how 6 points this year or five?
five or six. I can't remember, but I think we can. I think the application window opens in May.
Okay.
And I can't remember when we find out. Certainly, well, that I know. Looking at the draw odds, we had pretty good chance of drawing the unit we're tentatively looking at, unless something changes wildly or some sort of new deer disease pops up. Suggests that we shouldn't go to that particular unit that we're thinking about going to. So yeah, but yeah, definitely want to get some Wisconsin scouting in. I should do more close to home. I think I have a mental block for a lot of the public property that's accessible to me or near home, I should say. As if there's like not a caliber of buck that I'd want to kill, or would want to hunt, I should say, which could be totally a false perception. I should probably at least take a couple walks. Just, I mean, it's much easier and much closer to scout close to home too. So should definitely dig
Yeah.
into it a little bit, but I still have my doubts. I know I've dabbled a little bit in some of the stuff close to me and just never really found anything too exciting. So I think that's kind of what gives me that perception, which, who knows, there could be a huge buck lurking around close by. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, I know I'm getting off track here with talking about our 2026 stuff, but
sure.
peeling it back, going back to 2025, I guess I'll just start off with something that I'd previously mentioned in one of our other podcasts. That was the fact that I had originally planned on doing some hunting in Minnesota here and in Wisconsin. And then about halfway through the spring last year, just something hit me where I was like, the first 3 or 4 years of really trying to do the mobile hunting thing, I think I was in at least trying to balance like northern Wisconsin with like some Minnesota stuff here around where I live. I did a quick couple trips to North Dakota 2 years ago. And I just felt like the northern Wisconsin stuff is stuff that I've always wanted to like really learn to get good at. I think you start to realize that it's a lot of time and effort to start really figuring that stuff out. And I kind of wanted to try it different times of the year too. I'd always done like late October, early November, which great time to be out in the woods anywhere. But I had an itch to try early season stuff, maybe some other early October type stuff later in the season. I just kind of put all my chips in on northern Wisconsin last year just to see what would happen. So that kind of set the backdrop a little bit on my 2025 season. So I was able to get over and do some spring scouting on, we'll call it piece A and piece B, just for recognition in my mind to keep them straight and not be too specific. But piece A, I was able to, it's It's about 10,000 acres, roughly. It's like 7 to 10 or something like that. I was able to get over onto that piece early March, roughly right around this time frame. And I had originally was just looking for these little slight ridges to find some oaks. And I was able to kind of find a couple isolated spots. There's one isolated white oak that had two big scrapes underneath it. That's kind of what got me fired up about maybe potentially going back and trying an early season hunt back out there. And I mean, I sent you a video on it. It's in the middle of absolute nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was pretty fired up because I'm like, on years that this is dropping, this could be as good of a situation as there can be.
On
So
paper around here, that's an absolute gold mine. A white oak in the middle of nowhere. That's, where you would anticipate finding a mature buck.
yeah, yeah. So and I know, I believe it was a bur oak. So I know that those drop pretty early.
Right.
And so I knew I wanted to get on that pretty early. So that got me pretty fired up. I also, one big development that I had last year when I was spring scouting and then going into the winter too is most of the stuff around us is, at least around specifically where I'm at, is a lot of red oak. We have a little bit of white oak, a little bit of swamp oak, but most of it's red, if any, in some of the spots that I hunt. And a lot of times I was looking at like swamp edges, transitions between like alder thickets and like uplands, like up ridges. And when I say ridges, I'm talking like rolling hills, like
Right.
20, 30 feet changes. And I was noticing them like at the very almost top of the hills. And I mean, did some research on it and I kind of nerd out about the ecology of everything. But it sounds like most of these red oaks are growing in those high sunlight areas with like a lot of well drained soil. So that was something that I even learned last year. I was like, oh, well, okay. So now I can kind of anticipate where I'm going to find a lot of these red oaks and where these deer, trying to figure out like where these deer are coming in and out of them. So that was kind of a cool development. So I did some spring scouting on that property, and then I was able to bounce over and do a little bit of scouting on the second property more towards the summer, and found some clear cut situations over there. I think the logging's a little bit more active over on property B. And that property, I took a chunk of like, I don't even know, maybe 15,000 acres, maybe not quite that much, 10,000 acres out of a larger section, and kind of broke it down from some previous knowledge that I had during rifle season of just the layout of the land. Knew there was some couple clear cuts that we had done some deer drives in 24 that held a lot of deer. So I just kind of I took it from there and was able to kind of find some good stuff. And so that was kind of how I started the early season. Was hung some cameras after spring scouting, hung some cameras, and I hunted the first week, I think, of the season. It was the first 5 days of the bow season there. So
Right. And you were on deer, right?
yeah, it was, well, it was weird. And that's the other thing too that I think for me is I'm a pretty like, well, and you know this, but I'm a pretty high anxiety guy. So
Sure.
that's like my biggest problem as a bow hunter, really, is that paralysis, or was it paralysis by analysis? Yeah, there we go. Definitely like one of my biggest downfalls. So I'm always like second guessing where I should go, what move to make, stuff like this. And you and we had a lot of conversations driving home from different, sits in the evening, and it was just like, dude, you just gotta like, at some point you just gotta sit, and just kind of figure it out. So um what was interesting was in that early season, I had done kind of like a speed scout late August. So let's check and see if some of these oaks are dropping. None of the oaks that I had scouted really, there was a couple that were real light, but I didn't have a ton of oaks that I saw that were pretty actively dropping. Now, I don't know why I did this, but I blew like the first day of that hunt, just diving in deep and looking at all those oaks again to just verify that I wasn't missing anything. They
Right.
still weren't dropping anything. Um, so I don't know, like, if you did you see any decent oak drop around you? Because we're
No,
not super close as far as like where we hunt.
no, I don't think last year was a good acorn drop, but I know the previous year was. I had
Hmm.
a bear tag, and there was a lot of rumors flying around like, oh, the acorns are dropping, and that's why the bears are hitting the baits.
Yeah.
I guess if you would have asked me to guess if it would have been a good acorn year, I would have said no. And I think that was probably the case because I didn't hear too much of acorns dropping for anyone. Now, keep in mind, I didn't have a lot of hunting time and time in the woods early season.
Right.
Just really not much time hunting as I would like to do to begin with. Yeah, I didn't. Acorns were a huge factor last year. I mean, they probably could find the ones that were dropping, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And I think that's always the thing is I'm like, okay, well, there's not a lot of acorns dropping. I just got to find that one tree. And
more
one
loaded. There was a loaded
oak
tree
somewhere.
whether it be white or red. Red have good pull around here. Yeah.
I think it's just a little more consistent too. But I mean, and that's another thing that I really took away from my 2025 season was I started gravitating more towards that property B because it just had more edge diversity. So I knew regardless of the oak drop, especially when there's not a ton of oaks in our areas, or at least the immediate areas that I'm hunting and trying to break down right now, I knew that deer would be in those areas year in and year out because it had a lot of regeneration. There's a lot of different edge diversity, which, really looking for in a property when I'm looking to break it down in the first place. So I started gravitating over towards this other property. And I think so day one was kind of a bust. I did end up sitting like underneath a red oak that was like right off the road. I thought, well, maybe this, something wild could happen. Nothing ever ended up happening. So day two, I went in and did some scouting around, dropped a camera on what I had thought was a real early scrape. And I know sign shows that like a lot of your mature bucks are the first ones to start opening up a lot of and doing sign making after the velvet comes off. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's a mature one around here. So I dropped a camera on it and then I did some more scouting and I ended up, so that would have been Sunday night of the opener. I ended up sitting a clear cut that was, I think, a year old, maybe 2 years old, still at that regeneration line where you can see clear across it. And I was running out of time. And so I knew I could just burn back into this spot. And I set up on a little finger along a logging road that they had been using. The humans had been using with all their equipment originally, but I got up high. And I just wanted to glass just to see. I had the wind in my face. It was blowing across the cut like a southeast wind, pretty typical that time of year. And I hadn't seen anything all night. And then at about 6:30, just noticed something actually behind me. And when I turned around, two things that were really interesting. There was a doe standing there, and she had come out to where there was an old skidder where, like, either one of the equipment or something, there was a little turnaround and it created a little dip, and there was a seepage. So it had it created like two small water holes right there. And when I had looked over my shoulder, I saw that she was munching on the greenery that was around it. And so I got my bow ready, and I was fully ready to punch my doe tag on that night too. So was able to get in position, and she had jumped out onto the logging road. And when she had just like scampered out onto the logging road, she kind of took a couple bounds and wasn't jogging, but just walking pretty quickly away from me, quartering away. And I was able to draw back, and I did have to meep her, but I put one right what I thought was right underneath the rib cage, and I wanted it to come out front shoulder, opposite side. And the minute I shot, I was like, ooh, she just like stopped. I knew I hit her hard, and then she just kind of veered off into the brush. And long story short on that was super frustrating. I know we had been in contact about that. I got my dad with me that night, got shot. It was warm. We ultimately made the decision to back out. We came back early in the morning the next day, looked for a while, ultimately lost blood, everything. And I wasn't able to get her. So that was like a real kick in the shorts. Just because I have only shot one on public before I shot one in Minnesota. I shot a doe in Minnesota the year before on public. So I thought I was going to be able to close the deal there. And I wasn't. So we had spent a good part of the morning doing that. I was pretty beat. So the next night, actually, I went back to where that scrape was. And I was like, this is stupid. I should sit this off this other a logging road. And that's, I guess, another big lesson for me was I always just thought, oh, this little logging lane, like they're never going to pop out here during daylight, that's crazy, and especially early season, not pressured. I mean, it's no different than like a bean field or
Right.
something like that. Like they'll come out to openings
Right.
before, right at last light like that too. So I don't know. That was just like something in my head that I was like, well, they would never do this. That's too
Yeah.
easy or obvious.
Yeah. And we don't have the pressure that you get around southern Wisconsin or anywhere close to the cities which you live in. So yeah, I mean, wherever deer aren't pressured, yeah, they're gonna feel safe.
Right.
And as pressure upticks through the season, yeah, they might dive back a little bit or seek thicker cover. But yeah, if there's no pressure, I mean, why won't they? That's why that early season is such a sneaky good time to be hunting. Yeah. Were you wrapped up, or do you want me to kind of dive into what I had going on early season?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. The only thing I was gonna say is the I ended up not seeing anything that third night, Monday night, Tuesday night, or excuse me, Sunday night. Monday night, did some more scouting, and then actually sat on a cut that was on the other back end of that, another young cut. And this time, my wind was actually blowing out into the clear cut, and I actually had a doe and a fawn that night pop out of that same patch of it's essentially overgrown, over mature alder patch, and or excuse me, not alder, aspen stand. And so they popped out of there, and I was able to get an arrow through the lead doe at like 7 yards in the base of my tree, right off a logging road. The same one essentially, just on the north side, and I watched her tip over, and that was cool.
Yeah.
I was able to get it done, and that's what I set out to do last year was just shoot a deer, with my bow on public land in northern Wisconsin, and I did that, and I was super happy.
Yeah.
So I was just tickled pink about that.
Yeah, kudos, man. I mean, you put the time in, you were consistently on deer, and you got one. You accomplished your goal. So it's not easy to do. So
Yeah.
good. As we're talking here, I know we talked a little bit earlier this week and a little bit before we started recording. I was like jogging my memory and like, man, what the hell did I do? What the hell did I do early season? Found this interesting. Like things are popping in my head as you're talking. So the weekend before opener, maybe 2 weekends, is either week or 2 weekends before opener, I decided I was going to scout. A time you probably shouldn't be scouting, but when you didn't have any off-season scouting or the ability to check out any pieces beforehand and you're not really on anything, I decided it was probably better to have the intel than to not scout at all. So I was going to go poke around a couple pieces. And I know I talked to you about this. I know I sent you a Snapchat when I was in there, but there's two pieces that are popping in my head right now. Both were small. I think both might have been 40 acres. And I just figured I'd pick a small piece so I could kind of speed scout them and see if there's something worth hunting. On both of those 40s, one I cut a big track. And I was like, all
Mhm.
right, this is something, and it was fresh. I got a week or 1 week until the opener, and I never hunted that property last year. And
I
in my
would
head,
say after you said that, I was like, I don't think you ever actually went back into that property.
I never hunted that property last year. Why didn't I? Well, probably partially because I was really struggling for time last year. We can get into that later. But then the other 40 that I scouted, which was probably like, I think it was 15 minutes away from that 40, and just kind of a body of water, or we'll call it a pond, that consumed much of that 40. So it's really like for huntable land, it's smaller. So I could really speed scout it. So I'm like, all right, I'll buzz down here quick, check this one out. I found a rub. I found a rub there. I remember I sent you a Snapchat.
Hmm.
Like it was
Hmm.
early. Like this is a rub, man. Like, and I remember that one because I was only in there one time, laying out like super weird, and especially with the low canopy, it would have been really tough to get in a tree where I thought I needed to be. Um, so I think that kind of deterred me from trying to hunt it, but I knew I wanted to get back there. And again, I didn't hunt that one. I was like, well, what the heck? So now in my head here, I'm like, well, that's a little sneak peek into my 2026 plans. It's probably, excuse me, to check out both of those two properties again, and probably should do that early instead of the week before. But Yeah, so that's like, so I'm sitting here thinking like, oh man, it's frustrating. Why didn't I go back to those? And that one with a rub on it in particular, a rub doesn't necessarily mean it's a mature buck. I think you've probably consumed some content on that. I'm saying if a rub is early, it might be of something.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple different areas. I know Scott Bestial, who writes for, I believe it's Outdoor Magazine, or no, Field and Stream. He talks about that a lot, where it doesn't matter the size of the rub in that early, like just after velvet, those first couple weeks when they're just, especially just starting to like break up their bachelor groups.
Right.
It's going to be made by a buck that's had, I believe, at least one breeding cycle underneath them. So 2-year-old essentially or better.
Or a fork buck, it's probably at least a 2.5-year-old. So yeah, that was it. Did felt that one in particular, it just kind of had that eerie vibe to it, and there wasn't a lot of deer sign. And you hear that all the time too, that those mature bucks kind of hang out alone early season once they get out of those bachelor groups. I mean, it did have that eerie vibe of like I should hunt it, and for some reason it kind of got swept under the rug for me and just ignored. I don't know why, but I do know why I didn't hunt it early. And that same day where I scouted those two, I got done scouting that one and was venturing home, but I still had a little bit of daylight left. And stopped in the truck quick, pulled up Onyx, and I'm like, maybe I could class some fields quick near public. And I was actually not that there's huge mega cities around here, but I was getting closer to town where I anticipated. I try to get away from town a little bit so anyone who's hunting public close to town, I just feel like the public that's closer to town is going to have more pressure. So I was like, wasn't really expecting to see much. I guess again another mental block for me. But there's one field I wanted to look at, or two fields actually. First one, there's like a Basker X 6-pointer and like 6 or 8-pointer, and had probably 5-6 does in the field. Okay, cool. There's deer here, noted. And then the next one I go to, I see a bachelor group of bucks, and my jaw dropped. I'm like, oh my God. I pull up the binos. I stared at this deer for literally 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They were just there. So I think there was 5 or 6 bucks, and the one like scoring them through my binos. Now he had shed his velvet. The couple bucks he was with had velvet yet, but he was just an 8-pointer, just a tank of an 8. I'm spitball estimating. I know this is a broad range, but like 140 to 150 class 8. Like he was.
I mean, he was big.
I bet you snap, right? Like
Yeah, he was big.
he was. I know that like it was through my binos, the Snapchat, and trying to get a clear video, but like you could take a picture, and he was with a couple of bucks that were probably like 110 class deer, which 110 class deer has like it's a rack on it. You should be able to see that. But just like the phone camera, like usually you could see that buck had a rack. The rest of them had a rack at all in the picture, but I mean he was a tank. Scrapped all plans of those other two properties, and I'm like, this was a private field. This wasn't public, but were they? I for a long time I actually took my truck, I backed it up and down the road. I was trying to do two things. For one, I was trying to spook them out of field, as silly as that sounds. But I'm like, man, I don't want someone else to see this deer. Like, and then my mind was playing tricks on me. Like, I'm seeing this deer. He's standing here so pretty for me. I'm taking pictures of him through my binoculars and videos. And like, somebody else has seen this deer. Somebody else is gonna want to be hunting in there. So yeah, I'm thinking about all these things, and now I didn't have any more time to scout. This is the opening weekends next weekend, and I had it was like a 45-ish minute drive for me, maybe 40 minutes, and I had to work. I had a lot of stuff going on. It's not like I could get over there. So all I knew is I saw that buck in that field. I knew I needed a southeast wind, and I'm like, the odds I actually get it that following weekend. And I had no intel of what it actually looked like inside that once I got back behind that field. Looking at maps, I was like, this is really brushy. I really didn't think I was going to be able to get it into a tree. Opening day, I'm like, here's my plan. I'm going to park my truck at like noon. I definitely didn't want to like go in opening morning because I had no idea and it looked super brushy. I'd just make a bunch of noise and spook anything out of that field that I had to walk parallel to in the public. So I waited till like noon, and it was hot. It was really hot. And I snaggled my way through all this brush and got back behind that field. as quietly as I could. And all I wanted to know is, can I get in a tree for one? I really wanted to be in a tree. I've tried hunting from the ground. Besides North Dakota, in one instance, maybe that story will come up at some point, but not today. I've shot one deer from the ground in North Dakota, but I feel like I'm too squirmy on the ground. Like I probably move too much.
Yeah.
So it's best for me to be like in a tree. But I had to do what I had to do. Like this was an awesome buck that I'd be really happy to kill. So ultimately snuck back there, figured out real quickly, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get in a tree. And all I wanted to do was cut off those deer coming in the field, hoping they would do the same. And so I figured out I had to do like a ground set, a lot of brushy stuff, kind of tucked myself in the brush, pushed it, a few different ways. So I was well covered, made myself a little ground blind as quietly as I could because I had no idea. It actually seemed like it would be good bedding right there too. Ran to town after that, bought a little chair, tiny little stool. Actually, it's pretty cool. I'll probably use that again. Yeah, went back there and saw absolutely nothing.
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if you had seen something that night or not.
Absolutely nothing. And so that was a little bit demoralizing. And then the other thing that I found surprising was, there's no one there. So process analysis again, like, oh yeah, somebody saw this buck, somebody's gonna be hunting this. And like, if any moderately serious hunter had seen that buck, I mean, that was a really awesome buck for the area. They would have been hunting, right? So I think I caught a fluke, saw him in that field one night. And yeah, I mean, maybe he went back. Maybe I blew the whole thing up after hunting it the first time. I don't know. I hunted that piece in a different spot a couple more times. And that whole piece, and actually, like, I think on Sunday, the next day, I went in
Yeah.
kind of in the middle of it and found trail camera and a blind and figured out, okay, where there was actual like trees to get in, that had some hunting pressure in it.
Mhm.
And then there was a swampy edge that I went on in October. We can talk more about October later, but did see some deer there, but ultimately not that buck. And again, it was just a really hard property to hunt. Again, another one I should add to the bag to get boots on the ground in here this spring.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was my early season in a nutshell. I can't even remember after opening weekend if I got out again. I have a bird dog too. Unfortunately, I don't think he knows he's a bird dog because I do too much deer hunting. He does well bird hunting when I do take him, but there's always part of me that feels bad not getting my bird out early season when I know late October, November are going to be busy bow hunting,
Yeah.
especially when you have 2 tags potentially in Wisconsin and Iowa this year. So yeah, I'd like to hit it hard opening weekend and then, spend some time with the dog. In a perfect world, you'd kill one of the first 2 weekends and then hunt a bunch with the dog.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, early season was it was good. I mean, I think we both learned some stuff. You were able to learn some new ground. I had originally blocked off like 5 full days because I was gonna go hunt a spot in northern Minnesota and ended up not. That's why I had so much time that opening weekend. It was I had kind of already had that blocked off. But after I shot that doe, a couple things just occurred to me. One obviously was that pressure thing that I was talking about, and just how I think. And don't get me wrong, like the deer up there can be real skittish. I mean, they're chased around by a lot of different 2 and 4-legged predators. But I mean, early in the season when they haven't, you do get that like window there where they do seem to be a little bit more lax. Now, granted, all the deer that I saw early season were does and fawns. But
right.
when I'm hunting for does and fawns, like I do know, well, not the fawns, but when I'm hunting does, antlerless deer, I know that's a strategy I can put, kind of in my back pocket. But I thought one thing was interesting. I ended up putting a camera on that little pothole created by the logging equipment, and it ended up spinning on me. So one thing that I have planned for 2026 is getting a bunch of those straps with like the holders on them, so I can angle my cameras a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I wanna kinda dial in because some of those are pretty deep. They're not spring fed, so it's not like they have water coming in and out all year. A really
Right.
strong drought, can kinda dry them out, but at least during that early, like, during the summer, during early season before it kinda get October kinda dries out a little bit, I'm interested to see if that can be a little bit of a water source. Another main thing that I took away from that hunt was covers obviously everywhere in the big woods,
Right.
especially in the early season. But I mean, a lot of those does were bedded in areas that, like, when I look on a map, I'm like, oh, that's like mature aspen stand right there. I can tell that on a map. One because there's a lot of aspen in that area. Once they get to a certain size, when they almost get over mature, 50, 60 years old and older, um, they don't have a large canopy. So there's a lot of light that gets in underneath and kind of off to the side. So you almost get they're hard to hunt, I feel like, from a tree, because you get like a telephone pole from like 12 to 15 feet all the way up to like 40 feet. And
Right.
then, so it's just like, it's why, and they don't have a ton of branches. So you have that. And so you have a really thick understory and then nothing. And then like the very top. So another thing to just kind of key in on, as potential bedding is that, I mean, they can very well be bedded in those like overgrown aspen patches as well too. It also kind of just helps me navigate the woods, because I think that's a big thing all times of the year, is like, how am I going to get in and out of these spots
Right.
relatively quiet? Obviously, I'm totally fine bucking brush, but I don't want to be making a ton of noise if I don't have to, and getting all sweaty and alerting the deer of my presence. So that was interesting. And then I think I've just been too timid in the past too with like my boot scent and whatnot. I wear a rubber lacrosse boot, stuff like that. But I mean, they were definitely, that doe blew a little bit before they popped out onto that logging road, but they definitely could tell something like had been through there. I mean, people use a lot of those logging roads, bird hunters, they're coming in and out of there. Deer kind of get used to that to an extent, I
That
think.
that
So
like the ground scent stuff just has my head spinning. I mean, you hear so much of it. It's a big Dan Infalt, but Dan Infalt's hunting highly pressured stuff compared to what we hunt. I don't know. I think it's debatable if it's a factor or not. But then again, you probably don't realize if you did spook a deer with your ground scent a lot of times too. So I mean, it might be a factor. I mean, I think if you can avoid it, you know where you're going. You don't want to be crossing paths with deer if you can avoid it. But I just also don't think it's that big of a deal. Um, now, what are your thoughts on
yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, you can get away with it a couple times. I mean, I had a couple spots where I put some ground scent in. I guess kind of transitioning into our October, you and I had spent 3 days, I think. Later in October, it was like 24th through the 26th or something.
Yeah,
We stayed at my family's cabin and did a 3-day hunt there. And I spent a couple days on this creek crossing that I had found, where essentially one large cutover area was on one side. There was a whole complex of, thousands of acres of different varying cutovers and stuff on another side. And it all just kind of met at the head of this beaver swamp.
right,
And there was some decent trails kind of paralleling that and crossing it. So I sat that the first night, that Saturday night, didn't see anything. Went right back into that stand Sunday morning. Ended up having a spike buck come by. Ultimately ended up blowing that opportunity. I was going to try and harvest it. I was just after any legal buck.
sure.
Blew that opportunity. But where was I going with? Oh yeah, I was in there a couple times, and then I went back 2 weeks later to hunt 5 days during the rut, and it was the same thing. Like, I went back and sat there. I did an all day sit in there, had a doe and another spike buck come through as well. So I don't think it's as big of a deal. If you're like someone who's running a bait pile and you're going back like time and time again, especially like during the middle of the season, I think you definitely get that October lull, that dip in activity, just because they're aware of your presence. The rut hasn't kicked in, so a lot of those bucks aren't just like cruising hot and heavy, where like, I guess technically anything could happen. So I mean, if you're doing that, a couple times a week, you're going into bait and then go into hunt like every third day, fourth day, like they cue into that. But if you're bouncing around and maybe rotating around to different areas, I don't think it's as big as I had originally thought it would be.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So
But yeah, kind of. What's up?
go ahead.
Well, I just kind of transitioning into the October, like late October, early November. Why don't you just break down kind of what you did, any takeaways? Did you
Yeah.
do any hunting outside of that 3-day hunt with me?
Yeah. I got a little bit south. Well, so the 3 days I was with you, again, because of lack of scouting this year, I kept gravitating to small pieces, and I had to check this piece out. I remember calling you after it, but I crossed this creek, and it was super hard to cross. And again, I think this was a 40-acre piece. Again, there's not a lot of those tiny properties around, oddly, compared to when I lived in Minnesota. There was more like those smaller chunks of public. But so I crossed this creek, and it was kind of a bugger to cross. And I remember water was like right at the top of my rubber boots. Get across to it, immediately jump a deer. And it was funny because I had wind in my face while I was crossing. As soon as I got across the creek and kind of like up the edge of the bank, I felt wind on the back of my neck. Well, immediately when I felt that, I'm like, this feels like a spot a mature buck would lay in, right? Like he's got, and immediately a deer jumps up. Never saw it. I actually like trotted to the top of the hill to see if I could like catch a glimpse of a rack or something. Did I spook that deer out of there permanently? I don't know. Well, not permanently, but like, for the foreseeable future at that point. I
Yeah.
don't know how many people that deer sees. And from what I could tell, on the west side of this 40-acre piece, I get up that hill, and there's like a bunch of rubs all over. It looks good. I don't see any tree stands. I don't want to go too far because I just bumped this deer, and I know so
Mhm.
for me, total speculation. It could have been a solo doe laying there, but it just, again, my intuition told me like this could be something nice that I would want to shoot, especially with the rubs on the opposite side of the creek. So next morning I get in there, saw nothing, get down, and then I think I discussed with you, like looking at the map, I needed to be farther to the east. It looked like it laid
Mhm.
out well. There was a clear cut, excuse me, a clear cut on the north side of the property on private,
Mm.
and I anticipated maybe deer going to that and feeding. So I get in there. I did see one like ladder stand in the middle of the property, not hunted. There was actually a sweet spot too. I was a little disappointed because I didn't feel right hunting that close to that
Yeah.
ladder stand. So good for that guy. Hopefully he killed something if he hunted it in bow season or maybe rifle season. But again, that evening I didn't see anything. Excuse me, got a little bug in my throat here. But so I decided that next morning I was just gonna bump up like 100 or 200 yards to the east of that, and I got in there super early. It is the butt crack of daylight, that gray light where I can just kind of make out the trees. And I decided this is the tree I need to be in. Like it looked like I had a shooting lane. I get up that tree, and as the sun starts coming up, I look, and about 30 yards away from me, I see a tree stand. I'm like, crap. All right. And as that sun comes up more, I could see another tree stand about 100 yards away. So I'm like, all right.
I didn't know. I knew you seen one or two on that property. I didn't know you saw
I think
3.
honestly, I was hunting the west, or excuse me, the east edge of that property that time. That other tree stand might have been the private on the east side, right on the edge. So like, okay, there's 2 tree stands here. So that was kind of demoralizing. I didn't hunt as long because of it, and so I get down and I'm like working that creek bank back to where I came in from, and this is the first time I've been on the east side of that property. And I'm like, well, I should probably just take this huge trail that is going down towards the creek. And yeah, there was just like a nice, clean, probably could drive a 4-wheeler through it easily path. I get down towards the creek, and there's a nice muddy boot print in it, and get across that creek, and like, okay, all right, yeah. I knew it was probably too good to be true, but it also made sense to me. Like, I think there was a mature buck hanging out there, and it was the deer that I jumped. And
Mhm.
it made more sense after I found like that spot to access, that like he was farther to the east and he had good thermals, probably pulling up that creek to scent check anything coming in. So
Mhm.
sense. And then me bumping him where I bumped him, also knowing that other people are going in where they were going in, he probably didn't feel safe there anymore. Is my guess if I really had to put money on it. So I probably
Mhm.
picked him off of there. So sorry to anyone who knows the property I'm hunting about and didn't shoot anything. So but yeah, so then from there, kind of jump ship. I said there's that big 8-pointer that I had seen earlier, and I figured out that property was really hard to hunt. That other 40 I just talked about, there was too many people hunting it. So then I jumped ship, and I found an area that had quite a bit of land. I think it's a pretty popular spot, especially for rifle season, and jumped in there. And again, I didn't have many opportunities to hunt, but I was able to string, it was either 3 or 4 days. Took a little bit of PTO time and vacation time and got in there. And it's like every time I drove in, and I didn't like going in before dark because again, this is brand new property to me. I'm just kind of bouncing around. First time I went there for an evening, walking and I jump what looked like a really wide 8-pointer, like a wide, short, tiny 8-pointer. Go in and don't say anything, after jumping in. And now it's getting later. This is early November, and next day I go about a mile away, and I thought this was super interesting, kind of needle in a haystack type of thing. Get to the spot that looks juicy, decent walk in, one of those like thick spots. So I'm really trying to not make noise. I did have some wind cover. I get right to the edge of a little popple strip. And in this particular property, not a lot of these properties are around, but it was very uplandish, put it in terms of like grassland. Is probably a better way to describe it. So not tons of spots to get in trees again. And I get to the spot that looks awesome, and I jump what I think is the same buck from yesterday or the day before. I'm like, I'm like a mile away, but he was locked up with a doe, and so, yeah. And I'm not sure if I would have shot him. The way my season was going, I personally always like to target like a Pope and Young class buck. He definitely would not have made that, but the way my season was going, he might have got me excited in the moment, and I might have done it. I don't, didn't have the opportunity, so we'll never know, I guess. So yeah, that was a struggle. I know I went back to that property like 2 more times, and ultimately, again, like either driving in or walking in, had encounters with deer. Like the last day I hunted it, I had a buck grunting just like through some brushy stuff in the woods next to me while I was walking the trail, and I'm like knelt down, I'm kneeling down, like trying to hide myself in some grass. I'm grunting back at him, and I'm thinking he's gonna come out to this like literally trail, walking trail. I'm gonna shoot him. Wishful thinking, I guess. And I'm grunting back at him. I can hear him walking. I think he's going to come. And again, it's windy. This whole time period was a little bit windy. And like 15 minutes go by, and I'm like, all right, he must have like turned back. And I stand up, and I take 2 steps, and he bolts out. He was literally like at the edge, like waiting to come out, but he knew something wasn't right. So, you want to put my 2025 Wisconsin bow season and Wisconsin gun season in a nutshell is demoralizing. I think would be the word to describe it. But I was able to go to South Dakota. Would you like me to get into that?
Yeah, I mean,
So
why don't you kind of break that hunt down? Also, before you start though, I do want to say I don't know if it was necessarily demoralizing. You just gotta, I think, sometimes put a lot of that in the context too. You didn't
yeah,
have,
you're right.
you moved. Your son was born in the spring last year. You had a lot of moving pieces going on. So, I mean,
Yeah, it
I've
wasn't.
been more or less lately just trying to think long game,
Yeah,
and I think that's a lot of bow hunters and stuff, especially guys that are trying to do like public land stuff, either in areas that don't have a lot of deer or heavily hunted type areas. You just don't you don't think about, at least for me, and maybe it's a generational thing, being like a Gen Z. We're kind of like neurotic and like
yeah,
always here one day, someplace else the next, but um I just don't think we think long term very well, and it's
yeah,
just like just stacking that year over year. So I mean, you have intel. You just made yourself still a better hunter in
yeah.
2026
You're
because of
right.
it.
Kind of been dramatic there, demoralizing. If it was truly demoralizing, I probably wouldn't be like hunting this year, something like that.
Right, right, right.
Um, maybe disappointing is
A little discouraging, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
um, but almost anticipated.
Right.
Sometimes you rely on luck a little bit, and I didn't have luck playing for me as far as Wisconsin's gun season and all that. So then, but it kind of gave me a bad attitude going into this South Dakota hunt, which I drew a rifle tag for. Second time I've been, and the first time I was fortunate to kill a nice 8-pointer.
That was 3 years ago. 23,
22,
24.
23. Super cool deer.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
it was.
scored well, but he had super tall deep dews. Again, like I threw the scope up, really tall tine, buck. I shot him. I would do it again in a second. I see the G2s that he had, but he wasn't super wide. Whatever. I'm getting too much into details on that deer, but ultimately he's a cool buck, and I was super happy to kill him. So I had that intel on this property, and then I got to follow my 2 buddies around on that trip for the rest of the week. And so we had some intel in the area. My dad's never been out west before. He's never deer hunted outside of Wisconsin. So I brought him with, got him the preference points, and he drew. So it was like his first time seeing this stuff. The whole time I was a little bit worried about sending him off on his own while I'm also trying to hunt. And not that he's not tech savvy, but he doesn't necessarily use Onyx like I do. So I was a little worried about setting up to a waypoint. But he did really, really well, especially with the hills and stuff out there. Just getting around and generally really surprised me. But anyway, to backtrack a little here, opening morning, all I know is that I killed
When's
him
opening morning for context for people?
November 15th.
Sure. Okay, so that's would have been like the third weekend in November this year,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
a little bit later than you would anticipate our rut, but I know up there it's just a hair later. And I actually think we missed it a little bit. I think it was kind of they were more locked down. I'll get into that story. So opening morning, I know I killed a deer there the last time I was out there. Go to the same spot. Pretty good hike back there, hiking with my dad half the way, and then sent him to a different spot. And ultimately sitting there, I get a glimpse of one what looked like a smaller buck to me, and panicked for a second because I couldn't really tell how big he was. Thought I missed my opportunity, but then caught a second glimpse of him and got a decent look at his rack, and it's a buck I definitely would have passed on if I had a clear shot at him. So all right, deer moving, and I should add right before legal shooting time, kind of that gray light, I did see a doe once I got to my spot, probably like 60 yards from me, and I was really surprised I didn't spook her. As it got light, I figured she had like meandered up the hillside. I see a group of like 4 or 5 does go by. And I'm thinking, all right, there should be a buck in tow here somewhere, being the date that it is. Should be some rut activity going on. And watching the hillside, probably anticipating a 250-yard shot, and I just get a feeling, and I look to my left, and through the brush, probably 50 yards away from me, there's just a ghostly rack, and I can see the eyes of a deer. Just it has me pegged. I'm like, oh crap, I'm like frozen. So finally, this deer puts its head down, and I throw my gun up, and I'm looking at him through the scope. Like, it looks like a nice buck, but I was a half an hour into opening morning, so there was a point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to shoot this deer yet. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at him. Wasn't sure if he was an 8 or 10 yet because it was through some brush. I'm like, oh, he's probably like a 125 class deer, but it's opening morning, and I have seen in this particular area some really big bucks. But he allowed me to get to my knees because I was on my butt, sitting on my butt. I get to my knees, and he spins back to me, looks at me again. I'm like, I don't know how he's not bolting. And still looking at him through the scope, and he starts racking the brush, just making a rub on the brush. I think he's pissed. I'm like, okay. But then when he's doing that, I can see like his brows. I'm like, okay, he's a nice buck. And when he's doing that, I'm able to get to my feet, and I didn't feel comfortable shooting through brush. I take 2 steps. I got a clear shot of the vitals. Boom! Dropped him. I actually shot him just a touch high. And I argued with my dad about it because I think I hit the top of the vitals. He's saying I spined him. Very possible that I did spine him because I had my gun sighted in for much farther distances. The bullet might have been climbing at that point. Whatever. I killed him. Maybe not the best shot in the world. So be it. Well, that's who the show is for. The guys who don't shoot well, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I killed him. I got up to him, and I'm like, man, this thing. I mean, just heavy horned, tall G2s.
Yeah, he was a pretty buck.
And I was thinking, like, all right, he's like low 140s. Broke my heart. His G3 was broken on one side, and it was the tallest hind on the other side. He had like 2 inches of it left.
Yeah.
Super cool deer, Jack. And ultimately, I get him home. I score him myself, so this is unofficial for anyone listening. 52 inches gross. I scored him at, and I was, it was my biggest by a long shot. 140 had been my biggest deer to that. I hate to get too wrapped up in inches because I think there's a lot of characteristics that can make deer cool, and like kind of how you kill them that can make deer cool. So I hate to get too much in inches, but it's always something like I care about a little. Like I like to know. Yeah, ultimately, half an hour into that trip, killed the biggest buck of my life, and it was kind of just, I almost needed it. I really needed it because, like I said, before, it was just my bow season, as busy as I was, it was disappointing. But it also felt a little like unwarranted, like I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a weird feeling to deal with, but I got over it pretty quickly. It was pretty awesome. And unfortunately, I was able to spend the rest of that trip hunting with my dad and spending a lot of time with him. And he didn't end up killing anything, but I think he passed on like 14 different bucks. And those were like a 150 class deer, like I had killed. But he had passed some bucks that people would have been happy to shoot, and he said early in the trip that he was finding his tag. He wanted to shoot something big. So and I know he had a good time. And my buddy Jake, who was on the trip as well, shot a buck. So it was a good trip. It was
Yeah.
we needed it.
Yeah. I felt like after talking to you about it too, it's like you needed a win, just after a chaotic year. And yeah, I go back and I look at the buck every once in a while, the pictures you sent me. I mean, that's a cool one. And you haven't got back your mount on it yet, have you?
No, no. I got it in right away. My taxidermist that I brought it to said about a year. So that's what I'm doing there. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be super cool. Yeah, as far as just kind of how my November had progressed too. I mean, it was a really good year in general. I was able to tag that doe early, and then after we did that 3-day hunt together, I was hunting near a lot of these cutover areas. I actually had hit, and I don't know what happened, but I had hit a spike buck, a different one on that creek crossing that just kind of funneled a ton of movement. Early in that trip in November, my dad had shot a nice one for that area, like November 2nd. So it was my first day hunting. So I was able to get over there. I helped him, skin it up, ordered everything. And so I got to the tree late and I actually going off the intel I had in September, there was a real old logging lane that paralleled maybe 40 yards off of this creek that runs primarily north-south. And I
Right.
was like, gosh, I just feel like a lot of deer would be running that. And it connected a lot of different of these cutover systems. And I had gotten up into the tree. I was using my saddle that night, just real quick run and gun. And I'd no more than gotten in the tree, and I had two does walk down the trail. I'm like right underneath me. I was able to get some cool phone footage of it. So that was cool. A couple hours later, I had a deer bound off paralleling the creek, and then right before last light, I had two that were coming from my north behind my left shoulder, was facing directly south, that were coming in, and I had a west wind. I think it just went a titch southwest at that time. And so just before I just seen the two tails turn around and go, I would assume they were two does. But so I was on deer, and that ultimately led me to circle back around and hunt the backside of a clear cut that was on the west side of that creek. And Garrett Prawl, the DIY sportsman, he makes a lot of great content. He hunts a lot of that northern Wisconsin stuff. And he talks about a lot of times that just that little pocket of diversity he really likes to hunt is you get that cutover. And the cutover that I was hunting was, I think it was 3 or 4 years old. Definitely that browse line was like, it was kind of at the top of the browse line for the deer, but like all still really good bedding cover. Knew that I had bumped does and seen does in and around that, and I had actually caught an eight, like a basket rack 8 pointer cruising there. I think the morning of October 25th, and so I knew it was a good area. And I just went in blind, and I set up on a creek crossing that was coming up out of the creek from just like completely intersecting it. I sat kind of where that met the high ground, and it was like a little not alder. There's a little black ash swamp kind of that gave into this ridge, and on the top of the ridge was that cutover area. And that was November 5th, I think. And that day I had seen three does, and then I seen a spike buck running, chasing around, doing his thing, and then I had a 6 or 7 pointer come in. So that was like the best like rut activity I've seen in northern Wisconsin, just seeing 5 deer. I think it was 5 deer I saw that day. So I definitely felt like I was starting to make the connections last year. Another thing that really kind of factored into me finding myself in that area was the almost zero bow hunting pressure. The grouse hunters though, like, were incredible. I mean, multiple trucks from multiple different states at every pullout in this area. And I mean, like I said, it's an area that's been logged really healthily and been managed. And ton of grouse in that area. But because you were getting pressure from both sides, the east and the west, I really think a lot of those deer were getting funneled down into that creek bottom. That creek bottom had the best, I think, green food sources left, just natural forbs. that hadn't dried out, kind of in that moisture. So you had a food source, travel corridor, and I think the pressure also just kind of funneled in there. And so when I'm seeing 4 or 5 deer per sit up there, I mean that's pretty good odds. And I think I just ran out of time. I think if I would have had a couple extra days to string it together, I could have maybe, especially because that spot that I'd sat before I had to leave, set up really good for a southeast wind. I always picture all these northwest winds during the rut, and it seems like the last couple of years we've been having a ton of southeast winds going into November.
Yeah.
So I have a spot. In fact, as we're recording this, it's early March. I am going perch fishing with my dad and a buddy on Saturday, but I was able to make a day, schedule myself off for a day on Friday. So I'm going to go over, grab a trail camera that's near that spot and do a little bit more scouting to kind of figure out the pieces there this Friday. So definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, that was kind of everything that that I had as far as my 2025 season recap. I think in the end, it ended up both of us had really successful years in completely different ways, but definitely left us kind of eager for more.
Yeah, it's refreshing for you to say successful. Yeah, I often, as you were talking about before, sometimes it's hard for me to consider it successful because I didn't actually put my hands on a rack in Wisconsin. But yeah, you're right. I have intel to build off of. So yeah, I think I'm more excited for 2026 after doing this episode. But yeah, what do you think? I think that kind of probably leads us to our next episode of plans for 2026, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to kind of get in that. Hopefully we'll get after it here and get that podcast out in a week or two. I may be back from a little mini scouting session over in Wisconsin. I have some kind of updates on my Wisconsin hunting for this fall for the next episode. That are going to kind of shake some stuff up a little bit as far as my plans over there, and maybe some plans to do another little fun trip here in Minnesota.
Yeah, a lot more stuff coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyler, I will get you off to bed. I know that it's been some late nights for you with the kiddos lately.
Yep.
So we'll talk to you later, man.
Okay, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the show. This is Clear Cut Chronicles, and we'll catch you on the next one.